We have this peculiar idea that conflict only happens between people out there, between personalities, beliefs, or even whole societies. But I don't mean those obvious arguments you can point to. I mean when you really begin to see the strange, private battles unfolding within you, the ones nobody ever notices, but you carry everywhere. And here's what nobody tells you. The moment you start seeing what others don't, the entire architecture of ego conflict changes. Have you felt that quiet shift? Nobody tells you this, but the more conscious you become, the more confusing the world of ego seems. Because suddenly, you're noticing tensions you used to overlook. You're feeling energies that other people seem to barrel past without blinking. And you're sensing conflict not only between yourself and others, but within the very structure of your thoughts. Do you ever feel like you're watching two versions of you pulling in opposite directions? Do you ever feel torn between wanting peace and wanting to be understood? Do you ever feel that instant tightening, like your whole body reacting, before you've even said a word? What if everything we've been taught about conflict is backwards? What if conflict isn't something that happens to you, but something the ego performs through you? Now, here's where the danger begins. Because once you see ego conflict clearly, once you see what others don't, you can't unsee it. It changes every conversation you have, every boundary you set, every moment you choose to walk away, quietly, decisively, while others think you're being distant. Let me share with you what actually ends ego conflict, these hidden truths that reveal the dance beneath the surface. Let me share 4 things about ego conflict that most people never notice. Now, the first thing you must understand is the ego hates spaciousness. The ego survives by tightening, contracting, clinging. It needs tension like fire needs oxygen. When you suddenly become conscious and spacious, the ego panics. It feels like losing identity. Think of it like trying to pour the ocean into a teacup. The ego is the teacup, desperately trying to hold what was never meant to be contained. No wonder it cracks under pressure. I once knew someone who said every argument felt like a battle to win, until one day she paused, just paused for 2 seconds. And in that stillness, she realized something remarkable. She wasn't angry. She was afraid of disappearing. Here's the profound part. When you allow a little spaciousness, when you let the muddy water settle instead of stirring it, the ego loses its grip. And this is why ego conflict dissolves the moment you stop feeding it with urgency. The second, even more important thing, the ego is an actor, not the script. Most people believe they are the ego, that their reactions, their defensiveness, their stories are them. But watch what happens in a stage play. There's the actor, and then there's the role they play. Your ego is the role. You are the actor watching from behind the curtain. But here's what nobody tells you. Once you see that you're the one behind the curtain, the ego loses its power to drag you into unnecessary battles. Consider a moment when someone attacked your character. Your ego wanted to leap up and defend itself, loudly, dramatically. But another part of you, the quieter part, simply observed. It saw the absurdity of the performance. Think about it this way. The ego is like a small child demanding attention. Stand back and it settles. Lean in and it screams louder. And that's the secret. When you witness the ego instead of becoming it, conflict becomes optional. The third thing, which is perhaps the most insidious, conflict is often the ego's attempt to avoid feeling. You've probably noticed this. The moment a difficult emotion arises, shame, fear, inadequacy, the ego quickly turns outward. It creates drama, arguments, blame, anything to avoid looking inward. It's like trying to distract yourself from a splinter by setting the whole room on fire. Completely unnecessary, but very dramatic. Imagine someone who feels insecure in a relationship. Instead of acknowledging that insecurity, their ego accuses, deflects, picks fights about irrelevant details. Not because they're unkind, but because the ego finds conflict safer than vulnerability. Here's the profound part. When you're conscious enough to see this happening, either in yourself or others, everything changes. You stop taking things personally. You stop getting pulled into battles that aren't actually about you. You realize the conflict isn't about the topic, it's about the unspoken pain beneath it. This is why sensitive souls often withdraw. They see the splinter. Others see only the fire. And that's the secret. Conflict ends when the deeper emotion is allowed to breathe. And the fourth, the most critical of all, the ego dissolves when you stop resisting what is. This is the one truth almost nobody realizes. The ego feeds on resistance. It thrives on pushing against life, expectations, roles, identity, outcomes. It's like swimming upstream and wondering why you're exhausted, or reading about swimming and thinking it's the same as being in the water. But watch what happens in nature. Water doesn't argue with the riverbank. The sky doesn't fight the clouds. Everything simply is. I once heard of a man who spent decades trying to win against life, prove himself, outshine others, conquer his fears through sheer force. Yet the moment he stopped resisting and allowed things to unfold, he found peace, not by achieving more, but by fighting less. Here's what this really means. The ego can only exist through opposition, me versus you, right versus wrong, self versus other. When that opposition collapses, the ego has nothing left to grip. And that's why this is the most critical truth. You end ego conflict not by defeating the ego, but by refusing to play its game. So here we are, back to where we started. You've seen what happens when you notice what others don't, when conflict isn't something you're trapped in, but something you can consciously step out of. All of these truths connect because they reveal something essential. Ego conflict isn't a battle between you and the world, it's a misunderstanding between you and yourself. The beautiful secret is this: you were never fighting for peace. You were fighting to protect an identity that was never used to begin with. You are not broken. You are not failing. You are simply waking up to the structure behind the mask, the actor behind the role, the stillness beneath the storm. And as you awaken, conflict loses its meaning. You begin to live from clarity, from presence, from that vast spaciousness where the ego cannot survive. The next time you find yourself tightening, arguing, defending, pause, just for a second. Let the muddy waters settle. Remember what we've explored today. These hidden truths are not teachings, but reminders of who you've always been. You are the universe experiencing itself, briefly pretending to be a small self with small battles. This is the dance we're all part of. And so the journey continues, quietly, consciously, beautifully.